crafty friends, Wens here from Crafty Kiwi Mama. I'm popping in today to share a really cool quick card set with you that's been released by Whimsy Stamps earlier in August. This is such a creepy but very cool set. So I thought I would just flip through the different panels with you and share an idea of what I'm going to do creating with one of the panels. And then I'm going to create off camera because I need to do things like die cutting and embossing, and I can't do those things here. I don't have the setup for it. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do, and then I'll bring back the make at the end once I've actually done those things. So first let's have a look at this Misfits quick card set from Whimsy Stamps. This is the cover panel, and then I'll go through each one with you. The first few in it are way past my comfort zone, not in my usual wheelhouse at all. They're kind of really creepy, but also a very cool element to them. And I think for those who enjoy the darker side of Halloween, these could be some quite interesting and cool panels. I'll show you the first few, and then we can move on to the ones that I think are very, very cool. I love this one with the pumpkin head and the little spiders. He's a little less creepy for me. I don't know, he's still creepy, but I think he's kind of cool and I enjoy that image. That'll be a fun one to work with. This little dude, he just looks wistful and a little bit sad to me. And one of our design team members has done an amazing make with this guy, which I really enjoyed. So check out on the Whimsy Stamps store the examples that the team do on the set, because I'm pretty sure Tanya's would have been shared. Really amazing make with that. I loved it. And this one, hopefully you've all seen our incredible creative director from Whimsy Stamps, Deb Davis, designed an amazing card with this, actually using the die set that I want to use with my make today. So I'll show you that a little bit later on. But this reminds me of Wednesday Addams. Really cool set. I think it's just an amazing panel, so very cool. This one, how slooky is that? She looks really like she's come from a different realm, really. And then this one, I gotta say, I love the Wednesday Addams kind of esque one that's in here, but this one here is actually my favourite of the whole set. I think that is such a cool image with the wild hair. Just for whatever reason really spoke to me. So I've got an idea with this panel, and I'll come back and show you what I'm going to do with that in a minute. I'll just share with you some of the sentiments that come in the set. My light today is showing this as sort of like an orangey red. It's not an orangey red, it's a pumpkin orange. So my lighting's obviously a little bit skewed on the video. It'll show better in pictures. But it's got some fantastic sentiments, and I believe it's the same on the black and the orange version. So I'll just read you the one. So some of the options are for my favourite misfit. You put the eek in unique. I think that one's great. Stay weird, strange one. Even the dark feels lighter with you. Weird, wonderful you. Always together in spirit. Keep it creepy, cutie. And forever misfits. So fantastic sentiments. But this is the panel I want to work with today. And having seen Deb Davis's use of this fantastic die, which I'll show you here, comes from the Fire and Ice die set. But the fantastic die that she used on the very Wednesday Addams looking character. I want to use this on here. Unlike what Deb did, I think she actually put a black panel over the top. I actually want to just cut out the design itself, sort of within the panel, and pop it up so that it gives still a continuous pattern and there's no break in the actual pattern, because that paper is beautiful. I don't want to lose any of that at all by covering over it with a different colour. But I love working with heavy pattern like that. So quick cards are fantastic for this particular technique, where you use a die to recess or pop up different elements, but it continues the flow of the actual pattern itself. And I just think that looks really cool. So that's my plan of what I'm going to do. And I also wanted to share where I'm going to pull the sentiment from, because I've got a fun little sentiment to use on this one, which comes from a Dustin Pike stamp set called So Witchy. Look at these witches. They are hilarious. Love them. And the sentiment I want to take from this one, there's all sorts of fun ones like don't make me flip my witch switch, which I think is hilarious, and hey witch, or I was witchy, sorry. The one I'm going to use, because it just works with this image so brilliantly, is broom here, don't care. So that's my plan, is I'm going to stamp broom here, don't care. Somewhere in amongst that, I'll have to figure out where it fits with the frame. And then, as I said, to cut out the frame itself. And we'll see how it looks once I've finished. Hey crafty friends, I'm back just to share with you a little middle part of the process, because this bit I can film. I've pulled off the little sentiment that says broom here, don't care, and I stuck it down initially onto the door of my Misty and just ran my finger across. This primes a new stamp and takes off any coating that might be left during the manufacturing process that stops the ink from sticking well to the stamp. So that's now ready to go. And then I've chosen the position that I'm going to put the stamp down here on. And I'm just going to close the Misty door, pick my stamp up, and then just check. I do this quite often where I'm just checking the alignment of the stamp itself. Through the door, it's obviously got grid lines to guide you. That looks pretty good. When I'm not sure if I've got a good alignment or not, often I will grab my little piece of test paper and do like a dummy run before I stamp it down. That looks pretty good in terms of alignment there. So I'm just going to put, I've got a clear piece of acetate basically that I just have a little bit of washi tape on the edge of. It's just normal acetate, quite heavyweight acetate, but just normal acetate. And I can do a test stamping of the position of the stamp before I actually sort of commit to doing it on the main panel itself. So, whoops, sorry, me tipping over a whole bunch of embellishments there. I'm going to be using VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink. That is an excellent ink for any kind of heat embossing that you want to be doing. I think I'm going to gold emboss over that, but because the gold embossing powder is very opaque, you won't really see the black, and even if it affects the colour a little bit, with such a dark background like that, it's zero issue. So I'm just going to test it at this stage to see if that's well aligned on the actual panel, and if I like the way that it looks. So you'll see what I mean in a minute. So that gives me an idea. It's going to look a bit like that. So it's going to go partially across her body. I need to, the die cut line is just here. It's probably difficult to see at this point, but it's going to pop up the panel. So I need to make sure it's inside enough that the sentiment's still going to be legible and easily readable. And I think I like it there rather than sort of further up near her here. I think that's the right position for what I want. So I'm going to commit to that. It looks pretty straight. I can bring in a T-roller just to double check. I'll just grab that out of here. If we run that along the side, that's giving pretty straight vibes to me. Pretty happy with that. I'll run it across the top too so I can see it from the top. Yeah, that's pretty good alignment. So that's a cool trick to do if you have a T-square. I've got one that's a Simon Says stamp one. It's just a handy little 6-inch size one. There are lots and lots of different ones on the market, but the T-square is the kind of thing that is particularly handy when you're a card crafter for those little double checks. I'll take out my piece of acetate now. I'll clean that up a little bit later. I'm just going to lay the magnet over the area that's got the die cut out of it, because I don't want it to lift accidentally. But this little bit in the middle here, I do want to lift, because before we put anything on that panel that's had my fingers all over it, I need to treat it with some anti-static powder. So we've got our alignment from the surround there, and you can see how the panel's actually cut into that frame now that I've pulled out a piece in the middle. But this bit, because it's got a little bit of shine to it, if my fingers have been on here and it's picked up any of the oils from my hands, that's going to make the embossing powder stick to it. We don't want that. So I'm just going to grab, I've got a very, very old, I have multiple sources of anti-static powders. This one just happens to be, I think it was Woodware, I want to say, used to do an anti-static powder bag like this. And I'm just going to run that along where I plan to put the embossing. which will make it far more likely for the embossing powder to just roll straight off. I'm going to treat it a little bit. I do it off my Misty, because if I do it on my Misty, I'm just going to end up with anti-static powder all through the Misty itself, and it's a bit of a mess to clean, so hence why I did it that way. But I'm happy with that, and I'll clean the rest of that up in a little bit later. So we're going to stamp down the sentiment. Broom here, don't care. And I've ascertained that that's where I want it to be. Might just, you can see I've got a little corner magnet here as well, which I'm just going to put on to hold down the actual panel itself that I'm stamping on, in case I need to stamp it a second time. Just going to literally move my hand along that. I do have another little tool that I use, which I'll grab and show you because I really like it. Particularly if I'm doing lots of embossing or for bigger sections of embossing, I always use this tool. For a little sentiment like that, it's less necessary, but I find it does give good pressure, which is this Pink Fresh. What do they call it? Press tool. I like that it has the square corners. I've seen a lot of round ones, but our actual Misties are square. They have square corners, and I like that this has square corners. So that was my favourite, and it's remained a go-to tool for me ever since I got it. That looks pretty good, but I am going to stamp it once more. I'm going to hope that my placement in the Misty is bang on. And sometimes things shift, so you just got to be a little bit careful that things are returned to their corners properly in the Misty. I'm going to just stamp that down one more time, bring in my tool and just give that a little gentle press without trying to press so hard that I alter the way that the silicone is sitting. You don't want to squash it so much that the silicone takes a different shape. And then we're just going to lift this and pour our embossing powder on, and then I'm going to take it over to where my embossing tool is, which is off camera, so I won't subject you to the noise of that. I think we'll pause there, because what I need to do next, I need to find a folded paper for, so I'll be back in a second. Okay friends, so I'm back. I've done the sentiment, embossed it with gold embossing powder. I just used Hero Arts gold, I think it's called, just gold, Hero Arts gold. It's kind of a nice, I want to say antique gold, quite cool. And I'll just show you a little bit closer. I don't know if you can see it in that light. I find with embossing you always need to kind of tip it in the light. There you go, Broom here, don't care. So in the right light you can see that embossing really, really well. When it's in the flat light it kind of almost blends into the background, but that's a cool trick with this particular style of stamping. Now you can see as I'm trying to fit her back in, because I've been heat embossing her, she's not fitting quite as well as she could. So that panel I will end up putting some solid foam sheet on the back. I'll just use a black foam sheet, and so that bit will be completely flat to the card base. So it'll be sort of 3 different heights, but all look quite cool. And I think I'm going to choose, because I'm looking at that now and seeing that there's a white background behind, I think I'll put a black layer behind so that it's sort of merges into the background a wee bit more seamlessly. You can see it's quite obvious, the white background with that particular panel popped up like that. Hey friends, I am back with the next phase of the compilation of putting this all together. I wanted to share with you the adhesives that I'm using for this. Whimsy Stamps carry this range. It's actually from Scrapbook Adhesives, and for the main panel I've run out of, I'm talking about this little panel here, I've run out of the adhesive sheets that I was talking about, which is basically one flat solid layer. So I've ended up using the little Crafty Foam tape, which is a roll of Crafty Foam. Really like this stuff. I use it a lot, and I was super jazzed to find that they had it in black after a period of time. So they carry both the black and the white versions at Whimsy Stamps. Black is fantastic for my Halloween makes. Always make sure that I have some on hand for this time of year. And then the next thing that I'm using is the 3D foam strips, and these are permanent black narrow double-sided adhesive. So there are two versions of this particular one. This is the larger version here. Sorry, I'm sticking to the thing on the table. This one here are the large versions, and I'll flip it over so you can see the difference between the size of the strips. So the large version is probably 1/2 inch across, not 100% sure about that, and then the very narrow ones, 4 of those fit into one of these is the actual width of them. Can you see what I'm talking about there? 4 strips of this. So this is much, much finer. It's just this tiny, tiny little width here, which I chose to use the foam roll for this part of the image, but I could easily have used these wide strips as well. I didn't want to because they're fantastic for shaker cards. So's the roll, but I just find these particularly good for shaker cards. So I kept that for a later shaker make that I'll be doing. But I wanted to use these little fine ones because the middle layer of that frame that I was showing you before, this is the Fire and Ice frame, it has all sorts of interesting little jutting out sections to it, which is impossible to put a wide bit of foam tape on. But how clever is it to be able to do it with this narrow tape? And you can see it bends and wiggles and moves all around. And the way that I've achieved that is when I'm actually working with the section of foam strip, you don't leave the cover on this one. That's why the black of this is all exposed. If you want to shape it around the shape of the die that you're adding it to. So for instance, I can pop an extra little bit in here and shape it in and around. I have to cut that bit because it's too narrow at that point. I'm going to put my scissors. A little bit tricky with scissors once the adhesive is on view, but you can see that I can kind of tuck this into little spaces quite easily. That one I'm going to actually just trim with my fingers. You can see how I added in to get all those little bits adhered to, and I can kind of move and form the adhesive to bend around corners, basically, is what I'm trying to say, which is exactly what I've done here. Because it hasn't got the restriction from the tape that sits on top, the paper tape, you can move it and bend it in all sorts of directions. So fantastic for these sorts of dies that have, you know, extra bending and shapes going on into them. So I've filled as much of the space as I possibly could with that. I'll keep this little bit because I don't really need to add, I don't think I need to add any more to that. So I'm going to keep that and put the adhesive backing back on it, which will be totally fine. Save that for another day. But then here's the next tricky bit. You can see I've cut a bigger frame. I chose to go for gold rather than black immediately behind the image. I felt because there was a lot of gold in the design itself, not actual gold, but gold hues, golden hues. I thought I'd back it with gold and that would be quite fun rather than straight onto the black. But of course I want a black matte for that extra drama that adds, and the appeal of a darker paper like this being backed by black looks really cool. So I cut the frame. It's an A7 sized card that I'll be making with this. So I've cut the frame out of some Tim Holtz craft cardstock, which if you haven't seen that before, I'll show you quickly. I'm talking about this stuff here, which is the Tim Holtz Ideology Craft Stock Paper Craft Metallic Classic. So it's got all sorts of beautiful hues. There's silver, gold, which is, this is the gold that I've used. Is it? No, I think it's the second version. That one was too brassy. No, it is that one. The top one. And then a champagne gold underneath, which was too light. So yeah, I did opt for the top one. That one there is much more of a, what I would call a copper gold. And then a rose gold, really lovely sort of pinky gold, and then the black cardstock, which I've cut the base from. So really cool set, really perfect for doing Halloween accents and things from. So put that off to the side and Save that for another day now. And what we need to do now, basically, that I've got my layers ready, is to put them together. This section here, if I try and lay that over this, it's going to be a nightmare, because that's going to stick immediately wherever it makes contact. How do I get around that? How do I make it have a bit of wiggle like you would with a liquid glue? Well, here's the trick I learned from Kathy Zielski. For those of you that follow her, she's amazing. Is add your glue on top. So we're just going to add a bit of glue now on top of all our little foam pieces, so that when we go to adhere it down, we've got a few seconds of wiggle room to make sure that we get the frame lined up exactly where we want it on the make. So it's just about buying a few extra seconds. I know it feels really silly adding on a foam tape like that and then sticking adhesive over the top of it, but trust me, it works. Just to give you a little bit of what Kathy calls float time, and I totally agree, it is invaluable. So we're going to just add on this little bit of liquid glue on top to give us a bit of float time before it all makes permanent adhesion contact with the piece underneath. So we're going to line this all up and get it going down now, because obviously our glue dries quite quickly and we don't have that much time to get it down. But now we've just got a few seconds and a little bit of wiggle room to get our frame down and all the bits exactly where we want them to sit. And thank you, Kathy Zielski. That is such a cool tip. And you see that's pretty nicely put down. You can see the little hints of gold behind the bits of the flame that sort of peek upward. So some cool little shots of gold coming in from the side. The adhesive will dry clear, so those little bits we're currently seeing poking through won't really be that obvious. And anything that we see of the adhesive itself, the foam strips for instance, is black, so it kind of fades into the background rather than peeking on the sides and seeing white. So that's the reason why using the black adhesive is such a cool trick. So love that. Right, so we're going to let that adhere, and I have a little brick of clear perspex that I'm going to sit on top of that if I can find it. Never when you need it. Okay, I'll be right back. I know where one is. I just have to go and get it. I have quite a heavy one which just sort of sits on top of that very nicely and adds a little bit of extra weight while it's making contact and adhering down. The liquid glue doesn't take very long to dry, particularly the one that I use. I use Art glitter glue. It's my favourite. I've tried multiple different brands, and that's the one I keep coming back to. It just suits all the purposes that I need glue for. While that's drying, and I just give that a second to take form and make sure that it's adhered flat to the surface, we'll talk about this little piece. So I've done my embossing, as you can see, Broom here, don't care. And then what I did was I turned over the panel, and I've got quite a thick amount of adhesive there. That's actually 4mm of adhesive. So what I've done is I've layered up one run of adhesive across the whole back because I couldn't find my actual solid adhesive sheet. I've just run strips, and I did it from corner to corner because I wanted to get it to lay completely flat once I adhere it down. You can see the sides there are kind of sticking up, but the minute it actually adheres, all of that will lay flat, properly flat. Got a little bit warped in the embossing phase, doing the gold embossing, but it's easy to fix or remedy by using solid adhesive right across the back. And so double layered is going to make the perfect amount of adhesive on this, and I think that's going to look quite cool. So next little bit of the journey is taking all the adhesive strips off that one, because I didn't have that exposed. Just while I was working with the other one, I needed to have that exposed because of the shaping, but with this one I didn't really need to shape it, so I kept the backing on. So we're just going to rip all that off. I don't have jewels on my fingers, mine are definitely tools. Very un-Kathy Zielski like. I've been a nurse and a clinical aromatherapist in my working life, so I've never had beautiful nails, and it's not something I really aspire to. So practical hands here, we're just getting on with it. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on here for exactly the same reason. I want some float time when I put the layers down, and you'll see in a minute how helpful that can be for just lining everything up and making sure that we have the adhesion in exactly the right points. So that should be enough with that making good contact now. So we've got our beautiful gold centre. We're going to cover it over with the next piece in our puzzle and try and lay that in so it just meets the shape of it, but it's going to be a little bit higher than the rest of the mix. So choosing a piece down the bottom that sort of looks like it meets, and that's a pretty good fit. Okay, and then we're going to pop our block back on to let that dry. Eventually it's going to have the little piece, wherever I have put that, it'll look a bit like that when we're finished. So we'll take the block off so you can just have a quick peek. That's the finished piece. You can see the beautiful dimension of that along the sides and the little bits of shots of gold that kind of peek out at certain places. So definitely one that you want to handle and move in the light to get the full joy of it. But that's going to be my finished piece. I will take a photo and just add that to the end of the post here so that you can see the finished piece. And I will see you again in another crafty adventure. Have a fantastic day.